Hi everyone, welcome to week 4 of SPED 760. This is your Instructor Insights. So this week it's going to be all about behavior intervention plans. So we'll continue with the development of the informal FBA and BIP for a student. Once the functions of problem behavior are identified, then we need to design an intervention that encourages students to meet that function in a more socially acceptable way. So specifically, we'll learn how to use the data collected last week to create a behavior goal, design a function-based intervention, assess the social validity of the intervention, develop an implementation fidelity checklist, and plan for the generalization and maintenance. Then over the next 2 to 3 weeks, each of you will implement the intervention with a student and monitor the progress. So our tasks for this week will be very similar to last week. We have some readings and viewings to do. I'll go into the course and show you those in a moment. You'll be giving peer feedback again to peers. So by Friday at noon, you'll post a question or a section from part 2 of your project, and then by Sunday at noon you will provide the 2 peers with feedback or answers to their questions or your thoughts. So exactly like we did last week, doing it for the second part of your project this coming week. Then both parts 1 and part 2 and all the documentation will be due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. and I'll show you about where all that is in the course, and I have a list of what you need to include and things like that. Then if you want to, this week, once you have your intervention ready to go, you're absolutely able and should go ahead and start implementing it. However, at a minimum, you would start implementing it then after you submit your project on Sunday. So that following week on Monday, you would have a good 2 to 3 weeks to do it then. So let's take a look in the course and see what things look like. So we're going to go in here, and I have it set up in student view. And we're going to scroll down to week 4, behavior intervention plans. So our overview is here. It's pretty much what I talked about earlier. Your instructor insights will be here. So it does look like a lot when you look initially at the readings and viewings and things for this week. It's not though, I'll explain. So in the Otten and Tuttle text, so that's the required textbook readings up here, we do have chapters 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10, and 11. And those do deal with the behavior intervention plan piece. I don't want you to read those chapters from cover to cover. Rather, I want you to browse them. So then when you're working on your BIP for a student, you can go back and refer to them when looking at ideas and things that you want to implement with the student, things that you want to use. Don't worry about chapters 3, 4, and 5 yet. That has to do with social skills instruction, and we will spend a whole week on that next week. Then I'm also going to have you do some work in the IRIS website again this week. Just have to get a drink here. In the IRIS Center again. So we have 3 modules in there this week. They will be very helpful for you in working on part 2 of your BIP, so please take a look at those. I would have my BIP document printed off or somehow so I can take notes on it as I'm going through those sections. I also have a website here about executive functioning that I'd like you to take a look at. I threw in a video about applied behavior analysis. That's something that if you haven't come across it in your work in schools, you will. And I just want you to be aware of that. People tend to have strong feelings one way or another about it. I also threw in a couple resources for goal writing, specifically writing social emotional learning goals. So when you get to the point when you're working on your behavior goals, please use these as resources. Also use them as resources when you're giving your peers feedback next week, because the behavior goals tend to be something that's tricky for people to do from my experience. So if you're looking for something to get feedback on next week and you aren't sure, posting your behavior goal would be something great to get your peers' thoughts on and to really shore that up before you submit. And if you have a good solid behavior goal, then your intervention and your progress monitoring and everything is going to fall right into place. If your goal isn't solid, everything else you're going to tend to have trouble with. Then I also threw in an optional resource here. If some of you are looking at more information about positive and negative reinforcement, there's a handout here from the Iris Center that's pretty good, just basic information. So then we'll move on to the discussion board. It's a feedback discussion board. I believe the wording and everything is probably just like last week. The same kind of process. Friday at noon, you'll submit your question or section you'd like feedback on. Then by Sunday at noon, you'll respond to 2 peers. The rubric is down here. Then your template for part 2 of your FBA BIP is right here. Go ahead and download it, save it to your computer. I gave you some little tips for completing the sections. You'll do a behavior goal. You'll do a function-based intervention. You'll assess and reflect on the social validity of the intervention. You will create and attach an implementation fidelity checklist. There's an example of one within your Iris Center modules. There's also one, a few of them actually, within Chapter 16 of the Otten and Tuttle text, if you want to get some ideas there. Then you articulate how the student will eventually generalize and maintain the desired behavior. And then you will implement the intervention like I talked about for 2 to 3 weeks. And at the end of the course during week 7, I will have a document where you share your data, again, your progress monitoring data, in a similar format that you will be sharing your baseline data. And then you will do some reflecting on the intervention. So nothing that you need to do here now, just be aware of what you'll be doing over the next 2 to 3 weeks, and there'll be another additional document at the end of the course that you'll complete to reflect on the intervention and share your data. So please, after you download the template, I might print this page off this week, or at least make some notes about it. I have specific information about what should be included in section 10, 11, and 13, and also information about submission. So please read this carefully here about submitting, and please do your best to submit it in the manner that I'm asking you to here. It will make it so much easier for me to grade, and as a result, you will get your feedback and your grades back quicker. And then here is the rubric for your grading. So that does it as far as the nuts and bolts and documents that you'll need for your work this week. So before I send you on your way, I did want to talk a little bit about shortened school days, because that's something that comes up in every course. When I was an EBD teacher, that was something that I dealt with all the time. When I was a special education director, I dealt with it all the time, and actually I walked into some situations where students had been on shortened school days prior to me coming in the district, and I actually had complaints that I had to deal with the state and with families and attorneys and things, and it was a really stressful situation for me and for my teachers. So I just want you to really be aware of this, especially as you are planning the programming for students. Please don't have a shortened school day be a long-term part of your programming. And just a little bit about the legal kind of background on that. So in general, the length of a school day should be no different for a disabled student. Now, under certain specific circumstances, though, an IEP team can agree to shorten the school day of a student with a disability, where it's required to meet that particular child's unique needs and provide him or her a free, appropriate public education, so FAPE. Still, it should be very rare and typically only temporary. So if, for example, a student with a disability underwent a serious surgery and his or her physician recommended shortened school days for 3 weeks to give them a chance to heal and build up endurance, it seems appropriate for the team to decide upon a temporary shortened school day. Shortened school days may be warranted where a student is undergoing, for example, chemotherapy for cancer and lacks the physical strength and vitality to engage in a full day of academics. In both situations, the team decision would be necessary in order to meet the particular child's needs as related to his or her disability. Now, when adjusting the school day, the team should be careful to identify specific parameters as to when the student is expected to return to full school days and whether or not compensatory services are necessary to make up for any lost instructional time. And when I was a special education director and we had complaints filed for putting students on shortened school days, actually the compensatory piece of it came into play, meaning we had to make up for all the instruction the students missed when they were on shortened school days due to behavior, because that wasn't providing them with a free, appropriate public education. So shortened school days should never be implemented, as I've been insinuating, as a way to deal with a student's disability-related behaviors. Like I shared a little bit earlier, you'll hear about situations where families are called to pick them up from school because the school can't control the behaviors. Well, this may be necessary in very isolated events where there are serious threats to one's physical safety or the use of drugs or weapons are involved. It should not be a regularly occurring event. So be careful if that's going on. Keep really good records. If the school does not know how to meet the child's behavioral needs, then the best thing to do is to convene the IEP team and discuss solutions, which may include contracting with a behavioral consultant, conduct an FBA and BIP, change the locations of services in order to provide the necessary behavioral supports by trained individuals. So sometimes you might hear about setting 3 and setting 4 programs. Occasionally there could be schools that provide day treatment services and mental health kinds of things like that. So be thinking about those kinds of interventions within a regular type of school day. Shortening the student's school day is not the long-term answer, and it looks a lot like disability discrimination and a denial of FAPE that is required by IDEA and Section 504 laws. Another situation that I've come across as far as shortened school days goes is through transportation. So, for example, students with disabilities are transported on the same bus, but that bus leaves school 15 minutes early every day for logistical reasons. So that would be like a special education bus. Because of connecting with other buildings and picking up other students, they need to leave 15 minutes early. That is an inappropriate use of shortened school days. So you can't shorten a student's school day because it's more convenient for transportation. There's been similar issues like this that have been investigated by the Office of Civil Rights even for these kind of shortened school days as far as transportation goes and things like that. So if this is happening in your district where a child is regularly arriving late to school or leaving due to a bus schedule, I would really encourage you to do everything you can to try to figure out how you can alleviate that. Because if you don't, potentially, for one thing, it's not, the student is missing out on educational time, and it's discrimination because they have a disability and need to take this special bus. Then they're having to leave school early. So it's just not right ethically, but you're also opening yourself up to all sorts of legal type issues down the road. So some things to keep in mind as you are working in schools, as the topic of shortened school days comes up. What I really would challenge you to do is to find an update or guidance document from your state in regards to shortened school days for students with disabilities. This is usually a hot topic, and it's something that most states have provided specific guidance on to their districts. So if you can find something like that in the coming week or so, I would encourage you to go ahead and post it on our discussion board for this week, and it can be something that can become part of our discussion if you like, as far as designing programming for students with disabilities and not having a shortened school day being a long-term part of any student's programming. So, having said that, sorry for such a long instructor insights this week, but there's a lot to cover. This is one of our, like I talked about, meatier weeks. Then things will start to slow down a bit as you're really working on implementing the intervention. But anyway, have a great week. I have a picture here of my schnauzer sitting on my lap. I thought I would share that with you because not right at the moment she's not sitting that way, but many of the times when I'm sitting working on the course and responding to your discussion boards and things from home, she's sitting in her little bed like that on my lap. So anyway, have a great week. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns, and I will see you on the discussion board.